Hello. It's been quite some time since I made a video. Although I've been missing from this channel for the past few years, I have not turned away from the history of ideas. In fact, I have only become more enamored with it. Along the way, I have developed some of my own thoughts, and today I would like to read you a piece that I have been developing for years. This piece can also be found in written form in the link below. So, without further ado, here it is. The mystical significance of observational art, a relational approach to the mystery of perception. Intro. What is observational art? In the broadest sense, I see observational art as being defined through its dedication to the appearance of the external world. However, since we are intimately wrapped up in the way things appear, this is not a simple statement. This will be a theme explored throughout this piece. For now, it is enough to say that the observational artist is oriented towards aspects of appearance that have the potential to be seen, not just by them, but by others too. This communal dimension of appearance is what I mean by belonging to the world. Rather than trying to impose their views onto the world, observational artists use themselves as a means to see and discover what belongs to the world. While various approaches aimed towards things like narrative depiction or expression may involve observation, observation in its pure form is not a means, but an end. This is not to say that narrative and expressive modes of art are not valid in themselves, but that pure observation is something outside of these modes and is profound in and through itself. It would be a mistake to think that this disposition towards perception produces only photograph-like work, as it would be a mistake to think that the world appears like a photograph. The photograph, with its superficial resemblance to perception and its deceptive claim of objectivity, has managed to delude us into thinking that appearance is a certain way. There is no singular mechanical truth in appearance, for appearance is an attentional, conscious, and qualitative event. On the other hand, the world does not appear arbitrarily. It cannot appear any way we wish. It is something we come up against, something both in us and outside us. It is in relation to this outside that we can speak of truthfulness in perception and observational art. It is impossible for the observational artist to forfeit their style, preferences, and personality in order to see the world, nor is it desirable. As perceivers, we are bound up in appearance. A view is always a view from somewhere and someone. Absolving oneself is not possible in perception, and so to see the world without imposing oneself, one has no other choice but to offer themselves. In self-offering, one's particularities no longer obfuscate the outside by pointing back at themselves. Rather, they illuminate it by giving themselves over to it. In this sense, perceiving the world can be a sacrificial act. Many observational artists saw the world in unprecedented ways, but these ways, once revealed, could be sensed by others. And so, the uniqueness and novelty that they brought is revealed as being connected to the world rather than being confined to their own individuality. An impressionist painting or an academic still life can both be observationally or perceptually true insofar as they are pointed towards and resonant with the external world of appearance. A great impressionist painting is potent because it is connected in a real way to the appearance of the world. It reveals truths about light, atmosphere, and harmony that are open to be seen in the structure of appearance, rather than being a mere construct or expression of the person who painted it. Observational artwork is never one way or another, but it is always devoted to the appearance of the external world. Observational art's mystical significance. Seeing. For me, the mystical significance of observational art has to do with its unique and concrete relation to perception. We'll see how observational art does not merely depict, but is a mode of perception that inherently ripens into its own image, a seeing that can be seen. If the process is indeed in service of perception, then what blossoms is not an image of an arbitrary world or a world with something added, but an image of our world, veridically revealed. From an intellectual point of view, the confines of our subjectivity can seem impossible to break. An anxiety about whether confirmation and communication of a common ground is possible is even felt in a child's mind when they realize they can never confirm that their green is the same as their friend's green. With observational art, I believe a point of contact is made. We intuitively sense that we are not seeing an image merely depicting the world, but an image of the world deeply seen. This image not only corresponds to our perception, but reveals aspects of the outer world we have yet to see. In this, there is confirmation that we are citizens of the same perceptual world. It is not only because we intuitively know that observational art results from a process of perception that we relate to it in a special way. For the mode of perception it both participated in and emerged out of produces an unequivocal kind of image. Observational art produces an image that is imbued with a kind of light. This is the light of attention that gave itself to the world. We experience its glow in the articulation and organization of the image. With other images, our attention is modulated by our various needs. With the observational piece, it is gently guided by the traces of attention already given. The artist's perception finds new life as it actively modulates our view. We begin to see as the artist did and discover the surprise of beauty that is revealed in sacrificing one's attention to the world, something that can be carried with us beyond the artwork. A sense of communion is felt, not only in seeing another seeing, but in seeing the beauty they saw, and knowing that it is connected to and discoverable in the world. Seeing beauty. A common experience of observational art is the realization of beauty we hadn't seen before. Countless times I've heard people exclaim while standing before an observational artwork that they didn't know something as common as a rock, a cup, or a fold in fabric could be so beautiful. Observational art can open one to the fact that beauty is not solely sourced in exceptional things, but can be found in the everyday, and more radically, in the structure of appearance itself. How does it do this? What we find is that when we orient ourselves to the world in a certain way, the nature of appearance reveals its pervasive beauty. This is not to claim that everything is equal, but that there is something profound in the very nature of appearance. This orientation is one of self-offering, a giving over of our attention to something outside of ourselves. An orientation we will see is very different from a desire for self-denial. This is the type of attention needed for observational art, which again is a type of seeing made seen. In this sense, the observational artwork gives the viewer a helping hand to begin to see in this way. What happens when we attend to the world in this way? What we often find in the observational artist is a reverential interest and appreciation of not only specific things, but also aspects of appearance itself, such as form, particularity, subtlety, rhythm, and harmony. These things are intimately connected to beauty and are ever present in the structure of appearance itself, waiting and open to be seen. Although these aspects of appearance are pervasive, they are more apparent in some configurations than others. If we pay attention to the observational artist's preference in subjects, lighting, and composition, we can see that they are often related to a capacity to make these aspects of appearance more salient. Natural direct light reveals form through contrast with simultaneous definition and subtlety. Powerful compositions reflect ratios found in appearance, and certain subjects afford deeper displays of nuance and particularity. In the observational artwork, these things jump out at us because they've already been seen. The image shows us them. The observational image, in its configuration, treatment, and attentional structure, is a result of perception. This, in combination with the intuitive knowledge that the image arose from a process of perception, can, if we are open and willing, quite naturally induce us as viewers towards the deep perceptual mode that the artwork blossomed out of. Often, we find ourselves admiring the ability of the artist to capture subtleties, form, and details, which is an ability that has more to do with a process of perception than anything like the artist's hand. With this admiration, we begin to enter into the artist's perception as we develop and embody ourselves the type of seeing that we are admiring. To admire the artist's craftsmanship or skill is to enter into a different mode of perception and to start to appreciate the beauty of seeing itself. Rather than this having to do with personal achievement of the artist, which it is so often confined to, the felt admiration of the artist's skill is a transpersonal seed that can cultivate reverence and awe for the profound beauty and mystery of appearance. An enemy of observational art. Observational art, in its connection to perception and the shared world of appearance, has the capacity to affect us in deeply intuitive, immediate, and natural ways. The ideas I'm proposing here don't need to be added to or thought about when standing in front of a work of observation. Rather, they are inherent aspects of the experience that are naturally felt, if not numbed by a certain mode of thought that seeks to formulate things in terms of the same. This mode of thought is essential for language and our survival, but can easily get carried away and separate us from the pulse of concrete reality. With this disposition, the observational artwork becomes primarily a set of nouns. Its unique reality as a living artifact of seeing the world and how that alters our perception is eclipsed by a fixation on identifying what is depicted. With something like a painting of fruit on a table, we can be inclined to think in terms of fruit and tables, and unconsciously assume that there is nothing new in the image, for these are things we have seen many times. This is not to say that recognition ought to be eradicated from the experience of observational art, but that the necessary generalization required in thinking in terms of identity and its habituation, left unchecked, confines us to the realm of the same. With this tendency, we are easily seduced into conceiving observational art as a representation of something we've already seen and know. I have defined observational art as something that reveals truths in the appearance of the external world, and so it is, in fact, an art form which involves resemblance. This is why it is so easily reduced to a form of representation. Without resemblance, or more accurately, resonance, the observational artwork would be disconnected from the world, and there would be no revelation of truth. If one were to enter into an artist's studio and see their painting of a still life and the still life itself, from a certain frame of mind, they would indeed see a kind of repetition. There is the still life, and there it is again on the canvas. What is easily forgotten when confronted with this so called repetition is that the artwork actually informs and changes the way we see its subject. And so, rather than being a repetition of the same, it is more truthfully a resonance that reveals. If the painting wasn't there, the configuration of objects that make up the still life would be seen very differently. This is why the previously unnoticed beauty of something as common as a crease in fabric, an orange peel, or a bed of weeds can suddenly be experienced when standing before a painting. The capacity for the artwork to affect perception is also true for the artist as they work on their piece. As their drawing or painting resonates with its subject, they see the subject more deeply. And as they see the subject more deeply, they are able to modify their image towards a greater resonance in an ongoing feedback loop. This reciprocal specification or tuning is the process of observational art, and it is a unique mode of perception that leads not to repetition, but towards a transforming and deepening relationship with an outside. We all too easily forget that the observational artwork changed our perception, revealed things to us, changed us, in order for us to see in a specific key of resemblance. And so, for both the artist and the viewer, this story of a lifeless repetition, although intellectually seductive in its convenience, is phenomenologically unfounded in the domain of experience. This not so innocent story of a representation once embodied cuts us off from not only the power of observational art, but from the inexhaustible beauty and novelty in each moment of appearance. Once we think we know what the world looks like, we stop ourselves from seeing it more deeply. If we can loosen the grip this story has on us, even if only briefly, we will come to know that the profound and mystical do not need to be sought in another world, but are ever present right here, right now. The process of observational art, a mode of perception. It is not solely from within the realm of thought that this piece was formed, but from the living experience of practicing and viewing observational art. The realization of observational art as a unique mode of perception and the factors that block us from feeling this slowly became conscious in me over the past years as I contemplated them in practice. The first glimmering of these insights can be traced back to my time attending a traditional academic art academy, where I received much training and experience in rigorous observation and its organization. With this historically connected and formal type of training, I was introduced to levels of seeing that were inconceivable before my attendance. Furthermore, the academy afforded me the possibility of seeing this process in others as a fellow student and briefly as an assistant teacher. This established that while no two artists are the same, reciprocal specification is an invariable aspect of the observational process. The artwork is both the possibility and the retention of a way of seeing that is perhaps unachievable by any other means. Next, we'll take a look at what this process is like from personal experience. Hopefully, this will help show that the observational artist does not repeat what they see, but is in a continual process of seeing the world in deeper and more truthful ways. When I start a painting, I see the subject very differently than when I'm finished. With the first mark made on the canvas, a process of resonant tuning or mutual deepening ensues. Things like angles, proportions, values, shapes, and hues are continually refined in a living circuit where my perception of the subject informs the marks I make, and the marks I make allow me to relate to the subject in increasing degrees of resolution and specificity. In this process, which can take hundreds of hours, subtleties and nuances that I couldn't have imagined in my initial perception, such as a soft curve of a line or a micro shift in hue, reveal themselves in ways that often make me feel surprised I couldn't see them before. In many cases, my presuppositions are overturned. An area I first thought to be quite light turns out to be much darker. A slope that I thought turned slightly down reveals itself as turning up, and so on. These specifications are not made through direct perception alone, but by relating the informed marks on the canvas to the subject. In this relationship, the idea of an error takes on new meaning, for it is the discrepancies between the marks on the canvas and the subject that allow me to see the subject more truthfully, which in turn enables me to refine or tune the marks in an ever deepening co reciprocal relationship. In practice, drawing a slope leaning the wrong way is the very thing that enabled me to see the slope out there more truthfully and refine the mark. It is through this process that my subject reveals itself at levels of nuance and specificity that are unachievable by other means. In every case, perception is changed. Of course, this is a very brief account of the process, and many other factors are involved. Things outside of this direct perceptual loop, like paint handling and its properties, conceptual knowledge of things like perspective, anatomy, and the laws of light, can play a factor in the observational process. Nevertheless, these conceptual templates only gain potency insofar as they can enter into this vortex of perception and reveal things that are truthfully in the world. Considering this, everything in the observational approach is connected in one way or another to this core of a reciprocal specification. This is a process that is not learned and moved on from, but is practiced, pursued, and deepened over a lifetime. It is not uncommon for an artist acquainted with observation to paint until the day they die. Perhaps this is because there is no end to what they can learn. It is also important to note that this strenuous pursuit of seeing more deeply does not mean seeing more detail. An artist who oversees detail misses the ecology or rhythm in perception, and the image becomes detached from the nature of appearance as an intentional structure. In appearance, there is a symphony of qualities, and the observational artist learns in the humility of their process that its notes and rhythms are not in service of themselves, but rather the song they are a part of. Self-offering. The necessity of self-offering in the observational process. Earlier, I touched briefly on the idea of self-offering and its indispensable role in confronting anything outside of our individual being. How does this play out in the observational process? Observational art requires an immense amount of active engagement. The romantic idea that the artist simply gets out of the way to allow a deeper wisdom to work through them is only partially true. Brilliant states of self-forgetting, where the image is guided by an effortless grace, do exist, but it is misguided to think that these states arise out of nothing, or that they are inevitably in accordance with outer truth. It is often forgotten that training and unrelenting conscious assessment are the necessary conditions for these beautiful moments of self-forgetting to be connected to truth. I have witnessed many times in my process and others the consequences of becoming unconscious in observation. Drawings and paintings drift away from truth. discrepancies are suppressed rather than illuminating the way, and the attentional light of deep perception withdraws from the image as it loosens its connection to the sheer vividness and particularity of the outer world. What makes this tendency all the more difficult is that it can easily be mistaken as a courageous submission to outer reality, when in actuality it is a withdrawal into one's own being. If self-forgetting is to be in service of reality, it is spawned in the conscious offering of oneself, a wakeful and active receptivity that only superficially resembles an unconscious withdrawal into oneself. Perception is co-participatory. It requires two. If we want to encounter something outside of ourselves, we must do so consciously. This is true not only in the realm of appearance, but also in the possibility of deeply and truly relating to another being. Yet, here within the realm of attentive, active consciousness, there are also hidden traps. Actively giving attention is easily confused with self-imposition. This can be thought of in terms of projection. We imagine that we are encountering something outside of ourselves, when in reality we have expanded our own being to encrust itself over the world. In observational art, this results in the work becoming an image of the artist's pre-established beliefs, desires, and self-concern, rather than a living remnant of an encounter with alterity. And yet, assumptions, desires, and beliefs are an inextricable part of our being. The observational artist has the choice to reinforce these energies or to adopt a certain kind of humility that allows the reciprocal process of observation to put them in service of a truth that exceeds them. When the artist offers their faculties to the world, they enter into a dance, so to speak, that takes two. A dance where nature is asked to take the lead. They are not outside of this dance, but an integral aspect of it. Their temperament, their physical apparatus, and their unrepeatable position in time and space do not seek to fortify their own expression, but embrace an outside that is fulfilled through them. Discerning whether our efforts are in service of ourselves or another is difficult, for we have all kinds of unconscious motives up our sleeves. Developing this discernment is perhaps a large part of what it means to progress as an observational artist. Self-concern can be difficult to distinguish from devotion, but one leads to truth and the other to separation. If one is open and attentive, the reciprocal process of observation will teach them in profound ways. If they are caught in desire, expectation, and belief, the observational process will create frustration and desensitization. Frustration gives the illusion of care and engagement, and we can easily convince ourselves that we are frustrated because we value the truth of appearance. In the observational process, wanting things to be a certain way, rather than willingly attending to and assessing the way things are and are unfolding, is what makes a frustration possible. And so this care has more to do with us than anything outside. In states of frustration, one is not able to see the wisdom of reciprocity because the loop has drifted into the confines of their own domain. I would go so far as to say that any move towards the truth of appearance arises in the breaking free of these states, even if only for a moment. Managing these emotions is a difficult task, and it is something that I, along with many other artists, struggle with a great deal. Learning from this is a part of the process. What I have come to see is that with time, the observational artist places more and more trust in the wisdom of the reciprocal process. They calmly contribute through their conscious assessment tempered by reality rather than judgment turned back on themselves. The swelling of self-oriented emotional states become a signpost that reminds the experienced artist to turn to what is outside of them rather than a trap that they fall into. In this, there is a kind of grace. Like I said earlier, so called errors, when accepted as a part of the process, are actually a necessary means of seeing the world. An expectation of how long it should take to draw or paint a scene is really a self oriented desire, one that unconsciously affects one's willingness to allow the marks they've made to be assessed in relation to outer truth. With this desire, one may not be willing to honestly look at a passage that they have spent a lot of time on for fear of having to rework it. On another level, expectations of what we think something looks like can block us from seeing the reality of things. Beliefs about the proportional size of a foot can all too easily blind us to its size in foreshortened perspective. The reciprocal process of observation resonates across the boundary of inner and outer in moments of calm, attentive self offering. If we continually reorient ourselves to this kind of disposition, we cannot be led astray, for the alleged errors will no longer point back at us, but will reveal otherwise unseen aspects of the world. Without expectation and self concern, there can be no frustration, and every discovery becomes a gift of revelation. Self offering and beauty. What I want to make clear is that true self-offering isn't transactional. If we give our attention in order to make a great painting or to obtain beauty for ourselves, we are again turning back towards ourselves, and there is no real offering. To our causally conditioned minds, this kind of act is an impossible paradox. To do something for itself is inconceivable for the reflective mind, but not for the heart. Self offering is for relation itself, it is a leap outside. What is experientially verifiable is that this rare opening and giving, done in freedom, resounds in inexplicable joy and beauty, not only in the domain of perception, but in all of life. I cannot pretend to give an account of what beauty is, but in self offering, an inexhaustible abundance of beauty is found. The observational artist discovers this in their process, a discovery which does not remain confined to their private inner world, but that coalesces or transmutes into the external form of the observational image, open to all. This image helps us see what the world looks like in self offering. Conclusion. The seed within the fruit. Throughout this piece, we have begun to see how observational art is not reducible to static repetition, but is the process, product, and catalyst of a unique and living mode of perception. Everything we discussed does not remain in the realm of mere idea, but literally incarnates into the reality of the observational image through its genesis and reception. The way it exists and is received is unequivocally and non symbolically tied to the conscious attention it both participated in and retained. The things the artist learned and felt as guided by the wisdom of the world structure the image, and we come in contact with these things not through thought, but intuitively and immediately in open reception of the artwork. To feel the beauty of an observational artwork, to admire it, to sense the preciousness of nuance and particularity, is to drink from the fountain of appearance offered to us through observation. Despite much discourse on the topic, this aesthetic appreciation is not superficial, but a profound transpersonal reality being touched. The idea that for an artwork to be meaningful, it must challenge our beliefs and deconstruct us is an assumption baked into our time. While there is value in this approach, it is a great loss to think that art can only be this way. Rather than being a destructive force, art can be an immense gift, something that does not challenge but embraces, opens, and reinforces the profound nature already latent in the world and us. For me, this is what observational art so gracefully does. In conclusion, I would like to leave you with two imaginations I continually return to in the many years of forming this piece. First is the image of a plant. In many ways, the observational process is a kind of growth that produces a fruit. This fruit does not simply represent the life of the plant, but is a concrete result of it. The fruit retains the process that gave rise to it in its being. Furthermore, the fruit contains a seed for the continuation of growth in another life. Insofar as the observational artwork is a living result of a process of engagement with one's environment, which allows something of the artist's experience to be planted within the viewer, the plant image has been quite helpful. However, we have explored how the observational artwork, in its very genesis, does not merely retain a process, but also participates in it, and while useful, the plant image can only take us so far. As I developed the insights that make up this piece, I found another image very helpful. While writing this work, I would often discuss these ideas with a friend who has much experience with observational art. Often, these conversations would take place over coffee before attending a weekly meditation session at a local Buddhist center. In trying to clarify some of these insights around observational art and its process, I asked my friend to imagine her upcoming meditation coalescing into a physical form that was the direct result of her meditative contemplation. The thought of a crystal hanging in the air where she had sat in meditation came to mind, and I asked her to imagine this. I then proposed that this crystal's articulation and qualities would be the necessary and unequivocal result of the transpersonal truth she touched in her meditation. With this object, her insights into the structure of reality and experience would no longer be confined to her, but could be looked into and felt by other beings as if it were a lens. Of course, this crystal analogy is analogous to the observational artwork, which can be seen as a transpersonal lens into the way the world is revealed. Again, as with the plant, there are some shortcomings with this image, but what it helped internalize for me is the deeply mystical reality of what is all too often discarded as a lifeless form of representation.